Welcome back to Dragon Army Books. My name is Dustin, and this is the first wrap-up of the year 2021. And as a reminder, I'm no longer going to do TBR videos anymore at the start of each month because I felt like it was kind of redundant and pointless. I hadn't read the books yet. It was just books that I intended to read that month. And then for many times, I wouldn't even read or finish the books, so then they'd be on the next TBR, and it was kind of, again, redundant and pointless. So I am going to do these wrap-up videos, though, at the end of each month because I feel like that's important and there's more content there because I'm actually talking about books that I read in any given month. These are the books that I read in the month of January. Beginning with a classic sci-fi book by J.G. Ballard called Highrise. This is actually a book my wife wanted me to read because it is a movie came out in 2015, something like that, with Tom Hiddleston in it. Not based on it. I believe the film was called Highrise as well. It was completely about this story, which is a compelling story, an interesting idea that was kind of poorly executed. The story follows three different points of views, three different men who all live in a high-rise together, but on different levels, different floors of this high-rise. And this very expensive, slightly futuristic high-rise is divided into different categories of people and of living status. And so I think it's the first few floors, first 20 floors or so are kind of the lower class. And then the middle area is kind of middle class. And then you've got those elites that are among the top floors. And so our three different protagonists or points of views are a different representative of each of those levels. And the story is the slow descent into madness. A few people leave the high rise, but the majority of them stay as electricity is cut off, as the food supply runs low, as people and floors begin to turn on one another and begin to brutally kill, rape, pillage, all of these completely awful, awful things. Some compare the story to Titanic, others to the French Revolution, and while there are some similarities to both, I think it's kind of like an adult version of Lord of the Flies. And it's interesting. Again, I think the premise was better than the execution. I found myself quite bored, and I did finish it. I only gave it 3.5 stars. I don't think it's a must-read by any means, but again, a pretty cool idea and concept. I bet the movie is even better. Next up, I read Kingdom Come. It's a graphic novel by Mark Waid, and it is another superhero story told through the eyes of a commoner. I've actually been intrigued by this lately. I think last year I came across Marvels and I read the remastered edition, another graphic novel series where a reporter was kind of telling the story of the various superheroes and the events that were transpiring throughout a series of time. This is like that, but now we're seeing through the eyes of a pastor named Norman McKay, and he's actually being taken around the world and even out into space invisibly by the Spectre. They're kind of in spirit as they're observing the final days of the superhero. Our primary superheroes that we are familiar with, Superman, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, are some of these cast members that we follow and watch and observe, but they are disenfranchised, they are older, some of them have been stripped of their authority and of their kind of roles. Superman, for the most part, has been out of the picture for some years now, and a whole new group of metahumans have taken authority and control, but they don't understand the superhero code, and they don't understand why these original superheroes fought to protect peace in the first place. And so now these heroes, disenfranchised heroes, are coming back into play to try to set things right. So there's a lot going on here. The artwork is absolutely gorgeous. The dialogue is fascinating. Some of the plot is a little bit boring at times and slows down, but this is still a remarkable graphic novel series and is among my favorite graphic novels of all time. I gave this a complete 5 stars, thinking that there are some problems here, but it is still an excellent superhero graphic novel series and definitely a must-read for superhero fans. And then I wanted to continue reading the Murderbot series by Martha Wells with the second entry called Artificial Condition. And these are really short stories, novellas that are following this protagonist that is unlikely. It is a security system. It is a robot that has removed its governor so it is able to have more empathetic, human-like emotions, feelings, and decision making. And while it sounds cool and a lot of fans have really fallen in love with this series and its character, I thought the first book, All Systems Red, was somewhat underwhelming. In fact, I did a full review on my channel. You can click that link in the annotation. This is the second book, and it did not follow the same cast of characters from the previous book. It follows Murderbot, of course, but then we've got a whole new cast of characters and scientists or people that Murderbot is working with, along with a new AI that is kind of a secondary character in the story called Art, A-R-T. It stands for something. You can read it to find out. And I still feel not overwhelmed, the opposite, underwhelmed by this book and this series. Man, there's just not enough characters, there's not enough character development, and there isn't enough plot advancement for me to really care much at all. I still find Murderbot somewhat silly and fun, but one character is not enough to carry this alone. Again, I felt that this was somewhat underwhelming, but not enough to dissuade me from continuing the series. I actually read the third book as well. Before we get there, I gave this book, Artificial Condition, 3 stars out of 5. But then I read Rogue Protocol, the third book in the Murderbot series by Martha Wells, and just decided to call it quits. It's not for me. I get the appeal. I get why people like it. It is not poorly written. It is just not substantial enough for me to care and continue to give time to, even with being as short of books as they are. And there's only a couple more, I think, in the series. I don't know if it's complete. I know that there is a full-length novel as a part of this series as well, but I'm not going to get to it just because I don't care about Murderbot enough. It really is just rinse and repeat. Here in Rogue Protocol, there's nothing new. We have a new set of characters. We have a new AI that is friends with Murderbot. We have a little bit new drama that Murderbot goes on this adventure while trying to portray itself as a human or just as another robot. And it's just the same thing over and over again. And I just do not care anymore. For those of you that want a quick, light, easy entry into sci-fi, this might be something that you should look into. If you like a quirky character, if it sounds cool to have a Murderbot security unit that's a rogue unit as the protagonist, it's kind of leaving behind this diary that we as the reader get to read about its missions. And if you like a little bit of mystery here as to how Murderbot got its name and why it ended up the way that it is, then maybe you can try this series and maybe you'll enjoy it. But for me, this series is just not is not something that I enjoy. I gave this book 2 stars, the lowest out of the series so far, and just decided I'm not going to continue to read the Murderbot Diaries. Now that the Murderbot Diaries is over for me, I'm able to move on to other books like A King's Return by J.J. Johnson. This is a high fantasy book set in the realm of Islandia, and the High King has been missing for some 30 years, and so the kingdom has been fractured into these smaller kingdoms. I think 5 smaller kingdoms led by different rulers, and we follow 3 primary protagonists, POVs, different leaders of 3 of these different kingdoms. And while they're all different characters and kingdoms in their own right with their own kind of subset cultures, I didn't find myself attracted to or caring for them all equally. One of them in particular I did enjoy, and it was the king, the Kosi Imari, the ruler of like this African-inspired kingdom where his parents had been killed, and now he is teaming up with his brother, another warrior, and eventually his long lost sister, who's got a tribe of her own, to be able to try to retain their kingdom and try to bring peace to the area. I was more intrigued with that one, other than Titus, who is the son of the steward king that was left to rule the kingdom while the High King was away. And then you've also got Geralt, who is was kind of like his people were taken over by another kingdom, and he was working for them. There's all this kind of like behind the scenes darkness that's going on, and there's this darkness that has returned to the land while the king has been missing. Will he ever return? All of these things. It's this high fantasy, if I haven't explained that enough. It's not like steeped heavily in magic, although there are these magical swords. There these dawn blades. One of them is a spear. That's kind of intriguing. It was a good story, and it's fast paced. It's a pretty quick read. I ended up giving A King's Return 4 out of 5 stars. Finally, we have Malice by John Gwynne. It is a whopping 672 pages long, epic fantasy, excuse me. And I did not know if I was ever going to get through this book. It wasn't bad, not a single page, but it was a trudge to get through. 100 pages, 150, 200, 250, 300. It wasn't till around 300, 350 pages in that I was completely sold to this book. I didn't stop because it wasn't bad, but there was just so much that was going on. There were so many different characters to follow. I've never read A Song of Ice and Fire, but I would imagine that it's kind of like that, where there's a lot of different characters from different parts of the kingdom that you're having to follow, and you don't exactly know what's going on. But man, the payoff was worth it here. Malice is the first entry in the Faithful and the Fallen quartet by John Gwynne, and the story is so expansive that it's hard to kind of just compartmentalize into just a few statements. However, I will try. Many years ago, there was a god war that kind of shattered the land, and now the prophecies are saying that the god war is coming again, and that there are going to be two leaders on either side. There's going to be the bright star and the black sun, and these two foretold will lead either side of this brutal, bloody conflict that is right around the corner. Well, we follow all these characters. We don't know who is which, who is actually bad, who is actually good, who will turn bad, who will turn good. And so these characters are slowly developing over time. And while it does take a long while, and I do wish that it was 150 pages shorter, because it would be more palatable for most readers, the payoff is so worth it, because these characters that you finally get so invested in really develop, and you see their growth line over time, and then it makes that last 150 pages so rich. I could not put it down for the last 150 or 200 pages. I am most certainly going to read the rest of this series. It might eventually be among my favorites. Epic fantasy is a hard sell for me, and the only epic fantasy series that I've ever actually gotten into and read before is the Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson, and I don't think that you can beat that. However, on a different side of the coin, I guess, you've got Malice, you've got the Faithful and the Fallen. I am super intrigued by this series and its characters that I've fallen in love with now, and so I will certainly continue to read this series. I did not give it 5 stars. I gave it 4.5 stars, and again, and most certainly going to read more in this series. But that about wraps it up. Those are the books that I read in the month of January. Not tons of them, but a few beefy ones in there, and I'm looking forward to, I've got a great list of books that I hope to read in February. You won't know about them though, so stay tuned for my wrap up of February to find out what books that I read in the month of February. Let me know what you read down below in the comments, as well as if there are some books that you think that I should read based on any of these that I liked. Leave that down in the comments below as well. As always, thank you so much for watching and for liking this video. If you haven't yet, click subscribe, join the Dragon Army, and we'll see you in the next one.